Three. And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side. And we have our friends from MGoBlog who join us in this hour to talk all things University of Michigan, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, recruiting. We talk it all when it comes to the Maize and Blue. And there's a ton to break off this week, from Big Ten Media Days to a huge recruiting week for football and basketball. Joining me to dissect it all, as they do every week, the crew from MGoBlog, starting with Brian Cook. Brian, how are you this morning?
I am well.
It is good to see you well, my friend. Seth Fisher is with us also. Seth, how are you?
Good morning. Happy Michigan Week.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the venerable Craig Ross. Craig, how are you this morning?
I'm doing fine. I'm glad to discover we have a fish expert on today, and Brian Cook.
Really?
No.
Well, listen, guys, I got to tap into your expertise on a lot of things. There's so much to unpack, from media days to, the Michigan component to the furtherance of talks about expansion. You got the barbecue at the Big House coming up this week with a slew of top targets slated to come in for the football program. And right now with the basketball program, a big time recruiting week is Isaiah Collier, the number one point guard in the country, slated to come in today. And then they already have, arguably the top target on the board in the front court on campus right now in 4-star power forward Zayden High. And fellas, I went down to the NBA Players Association Top 100 camp and saw this young man in action. Sort of culmination of a spring sort of breakout for him, where he's gone from off the radar, and it was, you didn't really hear about him from a Power 5 standpoint, to now schools all over the country are chasing him, none more vigorously than Michigan. They were one of the early adopters. Juwan Howard, personally, when Juwan jumps on a guy as hard as he jumped on Zayden High early, that is a dude. So between the attention that Juwan is putting on him personally, to Sadie Washington prioritizing him as well, this is a top guy who strikes me as a longer version. And I'm curious what you guys think, starting with you, Craig. I haven't seen him a bit. He strikes me as a longer sort of Isaiah Livers. I wonder what you think of that comparison.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. He is taller. I think he about equivalent as an athlete, maybe a little better, or potentially a little better. Maybe a little more flexible in that his game down near the rim, probably because he is taller and longer, is a little better. I think his shooting stroke is similar.
Yeah, it is.
And I think he defensively can be I think he will be actually a good defender at the college level. I think he's probably an NBA player. How long?
I think he definitely is an NBA player.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in a year or 2 years or whatever it is, but he looks like he has NBA capacity. Yeah, he's a nice prospect. He would be phenomenal at Michigan. He's a great fit with Michigan. Juwan Howard does a good job with big guys, and so yeah. I think actually that Matt who posts on Brian's site has been talking about him.
He loves him. He's all about Zayden High. He's like, I looked up his profile, and Matt was, I'm like, he's 6'7". He's like, no, he's 6'9". Yeah. He's like, this guy is absolutely legit.
Yeah. So if you watch Zayden High's stroke, and it's important to remember, Isaiah Livers was a multifaceted sort of big wing. Michigan looks at their fours as like a big wing. You got to be able to shoot it. They want you to be able to put it on the deck for a few bounces. Can you guard quickness? Do you allow them to be the kind of versatile defense that they want to be able to switch everything on the perimeter? Can you guard? If you wind up switched on a guard, can you stay with that guy? I think Zayden High brings all of those tools to the table. And this is the ultimate measure. If, to me, when you're any of these big guys, you go back to Terrace Reed, you look at Moussa Diabate, and you compare Juwan Howard's player development to other coaches in the game. I'm not saying other coaches can't do it, but who can do it better than Juwan Howard? And this is my ultimate measure, Brian, is I just don't think that if you look at the arc of the career of a guy like Isaiah Livers or any of the other sort of big wings that we've seen in the 3-year sample space of Juwan Howard, that you can make the argument that there is no better developer, front court developer in the country than Juwan Howard.
Yeah, and that goes back to his days at the Heat, right? So he got Bam Adebayo, and I forget his name. There was the guy who was playing for the Nanjing Monkey Kings, who got an NBA max level contract. And Adebayo came out of Kentucky, right? So he had 1 year with Calipari. That's Juwan Howard being a college coach, right? That guy's no older than any freshman in college, basically. So yeah, he has a ton of experience in this department. And High looks like a guy, he actually reminds me a lot of DJ Wilson. So a couple more inches than Livers. I think Wilson was a little bit longer. High probably projects to be a little bit better rebounder. I mean, Wilson was able to, you could move Wilson out, and High is a little thicker. So I think that kind of multi-faceted four is a really important player on your team. And Michigan hopes to have it with, a guy like, oh my God, I'm blanking on the kid from DC who's 6'7" who's going to play the 4 this year, guys.
T. Will.
Thank you. T. Will. Getting old.
It's early in the morning for bloggers, okay?
So yeah, Terrence Williams is that guy, but if you can get a 6'10" version of that, that's a really valuable player to have on your team. So
yeah. Just a huge target for Michigan. It'll be interesting to see how things develop from here, because like I said, I mean, the amount of focus that they placed on him specifically, there are a lot of guys out there on the board, a lot of guys that you saw them tracking, but I didn't see them looking at any prospect any harder at the top 100 camp than Zay High. They were all over him. He clearly is a top priority for this program. We'll see how things shape up from here. And then from there, you go into another top target they've been tracking in Isaac Collier, a guy who just a few months ago, you didn't really see or hear, at least in interviews, them be a major focus, but very quickly, based on the relationship that they formed with that kid and his family, the development that you've seen with their point guards, the track record for success, continued success under Juwan Howard, I think they're a real factor for Isaiah Collier too. So this is just a big recruiting week overall. Here's the crazy thing as we segue over into football, fellas. I mean, you go from the Pure Michigan tour to Big Ten Media Days in between. You come right back home. You got to jump into the barbecue at the Big House, where you got a lot of top 23s coming in, especially on the defensive side. It's like every top corner on their board is going to be in town, from Chris Peel, who's slated to be in town, to you go down to Kankakee, and Jair Hill is slated to be in town as well. I mean, this squad, Aaron Gates, the Florida commit, is slated to be in town. So you're getting a couple of top offensive line targets slated to be in town. We'll have a full list over on the MichiganInsider.com. Recruiting is really picking up steam in both sports. So a lot of exciting things. But I want to give you guys, I don't know if you have any more comments on football recruiting. If you do, jump in. But I want to get over to media days and get you guys' take on Big Ten media days and your big takeaway. So I'll start with you, Brian, and work my way around the table.
Well, I just like the fact that nobody had any questions for Pat Fitzgerald, because Fitzgerald was like, "Oh, we went 3-9. I get it." So, I mean, he's been a bit of a stick in the mud, so it's pretty funny. And I think the big takeaways are the things that Kevin Warren's been saying. So coaches are coaches, right? And they're just going to kind of say the same things every year. But Warren kind of coming out, referring to the 14 schools and soon to be 16 in the Big Ten as brands was a little bit, but he made some good points about how LA-based schools give the Big Ten another window, like in terms of you can have a late night window now for television purposes which is going to be interesting because I'm not sure a lot of Big Ten fans are going to want to have their teams playing at 11 at night, but that's something that might be happening. So all glory to the TV guys. Huh?
Yeah, times are a changing for sure. Everyone, they at least feigned excitement about that, right? Say, hey, you're going to wake up in the morning, to your point, watch Big Ten football, go to sleep at night. Like you said, watch Big Ten football. So, but the teams that are currently in the Big Ten and the expectations for them, I mean, they all are talking positively, like you see at any media day, thinking that they're going to be better than ever, or at least better than last year. The curious thing for me was Jim Harbaugh's comments, because his were on another level of optimism, right? Where he said, not only are we going to be better in the passing game, he said, we're going to be better on defense. And because this no-name aspect of the defense is going to increase competition. And I've seen it before. We saw it last year with the offense. Remember, I told you guys we were going to run the football. We were going to pound people. Remember. Well, remember what I'm saying about this defense. I got the sneaking suspicion we're going to be better on defense. A lot of raised eyebrows to that one, Seth, but he repeated himself several times.
I can see what he's talking about. The no-name part is what's interesting to me because of the Ravens amoeba style of playing defense. And last year, I mean, we talked about how they were going to do that, and they only did a little bit of it because, I mean, we all remember David Ojabo trying to cover Jackson Smith-Njigba. That's not happening. You can do a little bit more. I still would not have him covered Smith-Njigba, but you can do a little bit more with Jalen Harrell at that wing spot. And that's how they're going to have to do it, because I haven't really seen any of their edges with any pass rush whatsoever. Like Harrell just gets stuck on guys. Upshaw hasn't really gotten around anybody. We've seen very little from McGregor. Morris is probably their best pass rusher, and he just does it the old-fashioned Glenn Steele way of shoving the guy into the face of his quarterback. So if that's what your pass rush is like, you kind of have to get it from somewhere. I think you have to get it from Junior Colson. He looks like a fantastic pass rusher. He's a great athlete. I think you can get it out of some of your nickels. And that's the other side of it, is they can play a lot more man this year. Vincent Gray was a good version of Vincent Gray last year, but they had to play a lot of zone in order to make sure Vincent Gray was not, put out of his abilities. Well, they probably can put Will Johnson on pretty much anybody. And then you got Turner on the other guy. And then your nickel is Zeke Berry or Samer. So like somebody who can cover. So the way the Ravens made that work wasn't by playing the way Michigan played last year. Last year, they just said, okay, look, we're going to rush 4 guys and 2 of them are going to be Hutchinson Ojabo. Good luck. This year, I think Jenkins gives them a little bit more pass rush up the middle, hopefully. But the way they have to generate pass rushes, bring it from different places and not let you know where the hole is, right? Like they move this guy over here to cover that hole and move that guy over there to cover that hole. Sometimes they play cover 0. And I mean, Minter, ironically, gets to be the one to install the defense that we all thought McDonald was going to put in. Obviously, both of them were on the Ravens staff when they did that. So that's, I think, what he's talking about.
Seth? I mean, that's Seth. Craig?
Well, I mean, Jamon Green, I assume, is still a factor at corner here, too.
Yes.
So I don't want to leave him unmentioned. The couple of things. One, Coach Fitz, I hate to hear him badmouth. I know that he isn't always the favorite person around Ann Arbor, but when I wrote my first book, I actually got an email from him, and I had a sequence of emails back and forth with Coach Fitch. I can't imagine any other coach doing that, really. And so I always sort of have a warm spot in my heart for him because he was very open and very accessible. So I'm a fan of his. In terms of media day, I'm a little skeptical of this idea that we're going to get. I mean, partly because Dave Nasternak and I started going back through last year's games, and we've been at night a couple times a week. We've been watching games from last year, and I've just been focusing on Hutchinson. And man, he was better than I thought. Right when Yeah, I mean, he was unbelievable as to how good he was, and how much of a difference a guy like that makes to your defense is hard to sort of quantify. It was like when Charles Woodson left. You say, "Oh, you got your whole defense back. You're only losing Charles Woodson." Well, yeah, and that's what Hutchinson was, only in a different position. So I guess I'll wait and see. I think this is a year. Um, where the offense, unlike last year, where we thought, okay, the defense is going to have to carry this offense a bit. I think this may be a year where the offense is going to have to carry the defense a little bit at least. I think the defense can be good, but I feel sort of inevitable there's going to be a step down. It's not, I mean, Ojabo was good, Dax Hill was good, but Hutchinson was something else.
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I also
Yeah.
going to tell Mike Morris that you just called him James Whitley.
No, I did not. I did not say that, and because I like Mike Morris a lot, and I think
listen, I tell you what, you mentioned Mike Mo, and I do have this sneaking suspicion that he is going to be a guy for this. I'm not ready to say, clearly not ready to say Aiden Hutchinson, but I think his game is going to jump a couple of notches. I think that his situational awareness. We talked about one of his standout plays during the season here on
Nebraska
the
one,
right? The Nebraska play. And I asked him about that, and he was like, yeah, watched it all week in practice, saw them, burying defensive ends routinely. I kind of knew that they were going to try to do was a red zone play for them, and he destroyed it. He destroyed that play, just like he destroyed the play against Penn State, playing standing up. So you see the evolution of his comfort in the defense where they can do more with him. Athletically, he seems to be in the best shape of his life now. He really seems to be adopting the leadership role that, someone has to adopt on that unit. I just think there are a lot of things lining up to him being a focal point for them defensively. Even so, I don't necessarily think that equals what they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's going from Chris Hutchinson to Glenn Steele, right?
Right. It doesn't have to be last year, because if Harbaugh's right about the other thing, which I think is his other prediction, which is far less aspirational and much more, hey, you got some proof on tape to suggest that this is legit. He said, I see these guys running around. We got 6 receivers who could be a number 1 guy. We got 2 guys vying to be the number 1 tight end in the country. We are gonna be more explosive. We're gonna be better in the passing game. He didn't just broaden it and say we're gonna be better offensively. He said we're gonna be better in the passing game, which echoes what we've been hearing from the players all off season, Brian. So I'm getting my optimism is kind of building for what Michigan can be when it comes to a downfield passing attack.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I discovered when I was doing some research is that Pro Football Focus had McNamara's downfield accuracy 5th in the country last year.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So, when Michigan needed him, I mean, they relied on the run game very heavily, but the counterpoint to that was hitting deep shots, right? And so, he hits the fade to Cornelius Johnson in the Ohio State game. He has another deep shot off that the flea flickers, which we're going to do every game this year. Flea flickers and halfback passes from Donovan Edwards, 1 per game, every game. And I just feel like you have the horses there in terms of the receivers, because you have Anthony, who's going to be a sophomore. You have Cornelius Johnson back. You get Ronnie Bell back. Don't
forget to say Roman Wilson. What is it with this fan base and not saying the name Roman Wilson?
Hey, he's from Hawaii. I never forget it.
Well, I'm just talking about, the guys who I think are going to be the downfield targets. Roman Wilson, to me, has a lot of speed, but, there are going to be certain circumstances where he's going to be targeted deep, but to me, he's the Breston of this particular core, where you're going to want to hit him with the slant and see him go. But Anthony's 6'2", and Cornelius Johnson's 6'2", and Wilson just doesn't have that size. That's why, not because I'm disrespecting Roman Wilson. I project him to have a different role in the offense, Seth.
I've just appointed myself Roman Wilson stan of the offseason, because it seems like keeps on getting forgotten whenever people keep on going to Andre Anthony before you go to Wilson.
That's kind of Harbaugh's point. That's kind of Harbaugh's point. Look at all these guys that we
Right.
haven't. Didn't even mention Ronnie Bell, who looked for a half looked like he was going to be a fantastic downfield threat, right? Which is not what you would have characterized him as heading into last season, but he seemed to have another gear. He was making contested catches. I mean, he was, he was killing in one half. If you can draw that out over a season, then wow. So here's a pointed question for you guys, and one that I got to credit Mike Spath for, and this came to him from someone in the program. He said, well, what does Cade McNamara have to do to show you that he's the guy, considering what you just said, Brian, that what PFF had him number 5 in the country in downfield shots. For me, I'll start out with me. To me, it is not leaving as many plays on the field. That sounds a little counterintuitive with that stat you just gave, but there are some throws there were some shots that weren't taken. Not just, I'm not just talking about just, the shots that were taken and missed. There were some that weren't attempted. So to not leave as much meat on the bone, which is a phrase that Harbaugh himself used after, I think, the Wisconsin game last year. So one of those games said, we can't leave as much meat on the bone. That is the measure. Do they capitalize on more of the shots that are there? If Cade McNamara has that maturation, then I think that's the way that he can hold JJ McCarthy off. But that's the only way he holds him off.
Well, I mean, everybody always wants the guy with the upside to be the guy, and I feel like most of the time there's a reason that the guy who's starting is starting, and that's not necessarily going to change over the course of a year. Now, I think you're going to see both guys play all year just because McCarthy brings a running element that McNamara never will, right? It's just not going to happen. Like, there was Michigan motioned a running back out of the offense to get a 4-man box, and that's when McNamara got to run for 12 yards because there was a 4-man box. So he's always going to be a pocket passer. So how do you make that up? And you're right. You have to be precise. You got to be Drew Brees. You got to be Tom Brady. And you got to have total command of what you're doing at all times. And that includes taking the shots that need to be taken. And you're spot on. Like, he needs to be a guy who knows exactly where he should go at all times and takes the maximum upside option. And then has the ability to check it down and not get sacked. And I think he's really good at that. Like, Michigan didn't give up very many sacks last year, and that has a lot to do with the offensive line, but that also goes back to the quarterbacks. So I think he is decisive. I think he is a guy who gets the ball out, but I think that too many times last year it was a check down or something, and he needs to get the ratio correct and see when he's got the shot.
Yeah. McNamara knows what McNamara is the best at of the guys that I remember actually like paying this kind of attention to. Is he sees it before the snap, and that's a massive part of Harbaugh's offense. That's kind of how he operates, right? You go out there, you see how they're aligned, and you know where where they're not going to have an extra guy on the inside to protect you, right? McNamara is fantastic at that. A lot of times what he would see is a mid-level read, like one of those where you have to kind of like fit it over a linebacker or something. And he doesn't take those shots. Now, I didn't get to see the all-22 for most of the games, so like maybe they weren't there. But judging from where the linebackers were, my guess is that there were a lot more of those kinds of shots that he never tried. And Washington game specifically, I know there were a lot of them because I was at that game watching for that specifically, and he just did not see it, and they were protecting the check down. And like, if that's going to be what you are, right? If you're not the guy who's going to be able to take those kinds of riskier throws, or maybe you don't trust your arm to do that, that's where McCarthy can be like, well, I can do that.
Yeah. It's the downfield throws versus zone. Especially, shots over the middle versus zone. Those are the ones that he tends to check. I don't want to make it sound like he checked them down all the time, but when you saw a check down, that was a scenario that was quite common, was quite frequent. a shallow cross with a dig behind it against zone, I'm checking that down. And that was, sometimes he would scramble and it would be a nice play. But I remember whether it was Devin or it was out, it's like, yeah, but there's a bigger play. There's a bigger play here to be had. Those are the kinds of plays that if you're going to progress beyond what you were last year, those are the kinds of plays that will show that kind of progression in him. If he doesn't, I mean, you can maybe be back playing against Ohio State for the championship again, but can you move past them without that progression? I don't know. And I think that's the measure for Jim Harbaugh, is determining that. Can he capitalize on more of those plays, or does it have to be JJ?
I mean, the thing I like about McNamara is he seems to understand, or he does understand, that the worst event that happens in a football game is an interception. The worst event. And for an offense or for a team, and he was very careful. And if you recall, in the Ohio State game, Michigan's ahead 7-0 and about ready to smoke them in the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game, and Michigan's driving, and he makes a very bad throw that's intercepted by Ohio State down at about the 4 or 5 yard line on that drive. And that was a sort of thing that he did very few times over the course of the year, very, very little of that. And so I guess from my point of view, I'm willing to give up a little bit of that to gain not turning the ball over on interceptions. And in fact, it made sense last year because the defense was so good. Now, because the defense was so good, you could maybe give up a play or two in deference to not turning it over, particularly where A, they just had a kick-ass ground game, and B, they seemed willing to go forward a little more on fourth down than has historically been the case. And so, I'm not, I don't know what has to happen to have McCarthy play over McNamara. I just don't know. I mean, they're both good, and whoever wins that job is probably winning it for a reason. Yeah. I mean, for me, the bigger issue is, what does right tackle look like?
Two things, and it's a great segue and a great break point. But I agree with Brian that, look, the floor for the quarterback competition is that both play significantly, right?
Yeah.
That is the minimum for both guys.
Sure.
Is that they at least for the first half of the season, they both play a lot. I think the turning point will be, do you see that added level being reached by either guy in a span of games where both guys should be wildly successful? It's a tougher measure because you're not seeing you're not seeing the bastions, the monsters of the Midway. You're seeing the little sisters of the poor for the most part, except the exception being at Iowa against a pretty good secondary. That will be a good litmus test for this competition, in my opinion, because to your point, Craig, you said, hey, I'll take the foregoing the bad or putting away the bad outcome, even if it means you take a few less shots. I think that's good enough to put you in contention. Is it good enough for you to win it? And that I assume is the measure for Michigan. Repeating as Big Ten champions and winning a playoff game. Can you do that with last year's approach? I just don't think you can. You got to show that you can do more. Can he show that he can do more? One thing that you can do more with is the offensive line, potentially. I want to get to this on the other side, Craig, because one thing that Cade said, he said the offensive line this year, with the experience they have, and Olu Oluwatimi coming in, we want the offensive line not just looking at the front. We also want them checking the secondary and making calls or having their play being predicated on, do they see a blitz coming from a corner or a safety, right? And changing things up based on that. We'll get to this on the other side and talk about the graduation, the maturation of the offense and how that can affect their fortunes this season on the other side. Stay tuned for more MGoBlog Roundtable when we come back here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
All right, you
Yeah.
guys, what do you think? I'm going to pull up a play that when Cade mentioned that, it made me think of it immediately. Hold on, but go ahead. I think it's a great question. Who's right?
I wasn't gonna I wasn't gonna get into this again because I know it's such a hobby horse for me, but like the zone reads too for McNamara are like his other big weakness there. Like
of course. I mean,
he does not keep it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he right, and that's where JJ is just
and it changes the running game. It makes a huge difference for the running game. And when you got a guy like Blake Corum who, you break him into the second level and it is going to be fun. Like that's where I think that that's kind of why I'm leaning McCarthy by the end of the season. But McCarthy's got to get a long way to get to the point where they can trust him like they can trust Cade, because I don't want to underrate how good of a quarterback he is.
I have a question for you guys. I mean, is it possible for a team to have too many weapons? I mean, is it possible that Michigan has too many guys, 6 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks, running? I mean, at some point in time, do you have, are people sort of not?
No, Craig, that's called a team. Okay. All right.
All right. I mean, I'm not saying it is.
That's why Ohio State can have the best receivers in the country and 3 guys going in the first round, and let Alabama use one of them for a year because they don't need them. Like that's.
Well, I mean,
I don't mind that.
I mean, that's why Brian Day is saying, I assume I need $13 million to keep people out of the transfer portal, and but I mean, I don't know.
Ryan Day needs $13 million to keep guys out of the transfer portal because the guys that he has came from money.
Well, I don't know. I'm not saying this as any truth to it, but it's something you look at and you say, my goodness, they have so many playmakers on this offense, or playmakers and potential playmakers, not even counting the kids who came in.
I mean, you do have to they're losing Samer still to the defense because you got to get Henning on the field, right? And we haven't. Ronnie Bell is probably going to go take over the slot, but I mean that's what you're supposed to have when you look at the teams that win championships consistently. They have guys behind guys, and sometimes you have a great player who'd be getting 1,000 yards at another school, but that's. If you want to win championships, you need to have more than one. Look what happened to Penn State last year. They had one quarterback, and they're playing Iowa. They're up 24-3 or whatever it was, and they're rolling. Yeah. And then they lose their guy, and all of a sudden they got nothing.
Yeah, I can't find the play, damn it. But when you mentioned the right tackle, it made me think of that, and it made me think of what Cade said. He said, Sharon Moore is working with the offensive line, working with Olu on checking the secondary. And there was a play in the Indiana game where JJ McCarthy gets wrecked because your right tackle didn't realize that a corner blitz was coming.
Okay.
And I remember, I can't remember if it was Devin or Al. I asked this at the time, and I think it was Devin. I said, Devin, can you expect your right tackle to sort of anticipate the corner blitz coming and adjust based on that? Based on that, you sort of see the safety kind of moving off over the hash and realizing that means a corner blitz is coming. He's like saying, I don't know if you can really have your offensive line doing that, checking the secondary, seeing where the safety is lined up. I don't know. That's kind of next level stuff. Sounds like that's exactly what Sharon is looking for from his guys.
Radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Are you looking to renovate your kitchen, your bathroom? Maybe you need new windows or doors. Maybe you need a new roof or new floors. Our friends at Chelsea Lumber can help you out with that. Chelsea Lumber, where the home begins, with 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. When we needed our kitchen renovated, that's where we went. Gave them our budget. They showed us an array of options. Once we settled on this is what we like, countertop, cabinetry, and all that, design specialists put together an awesome design. They even helped us find a contractor to bring that design to life. That is the Chelsea Lumber difference, with 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. Chelsea Lumber, where the home begins. You can find them online at chelsealumber.com. So, fellas, offensive line is, I don't think it's too forward. I don't think it's overly optimistic, starting with you, Craig, to expect this offensive line to be better. Now, understand that's heavy. That's a heavy statement considering how good they were on the ground last year. But I expect them to be even better, even with the question mark that you just put at the right tackle position.
Yeah, I'm hoping they'll be better too. I don't know if they will be better because Andrew Stuber was a good player at right tackle, and I don't know if they can make an improvement there or at least stay steady there. The rest of the offensive line sure as heck should be better, I would guess, than last year. It's more, you've got everyone back and they're experienced and they're good. And I mean, well, Olu takes over for Vistardis. Vistardis was an extremely smart guy. I think he's going to medical school, but Olu was a Remington finalist last year, so I don't think we're going backwards at center, and the rest of the line is back. I can't imagine that this won't be a good line. You worry to some extent, or I worry a bit about Haskins because I thought he was just a remarkable player, and obviously Seth did too. We both have our Haskins jerseys up behind us, and and he was a remarkable running back, but obviously so is Blake Corum and Donovan. They're remarkable talents. Whether they've got the brute, in short yardage downs, I don't know that yet. But those are the questions. That's it. And the questions are, can you have a team with two quarterbacks? And can you have a team and I think both of them are going to have to play, and they're both going to get time in the first 3 or 4 games at least. And how that sorts itself out, I know at this point I have no clue, but all looks good. I mean, the questions when you're talking about,
if you win the Joe Moore Award and then you improve on the offensive line, that should rename it the Sharon Moore Award.
Right, and that was a big question. Like, how do you improve? What's next level?
I honestly don't think that they were the best offensive line in the country last year, but it was. I mean, their level that they had was really good. They are, one of the questions is how much is left over from Warner, and how much is Moore teaching them. But I mean, from indications, some guys have gotten a lot better, and that doesn't really mean Warner found them. But I mean, the way that they were talking about Trente Jones, you were worried about right tackle. There was no competition this year. There was no okay, we don't know if it's going to be Barnhart or Jones. It was, oh no, Trente Jones is going to be the right tackle. They love that guy. He's graded out well. He played tight end last year, so it's a little bit easier. But usually guys who graded well as that 6th offensive lineman tend to come in and fit in pretty well into the offensive line. We've got, Cesar Ruiz did that for a year. Vastardis is one of those guys, blanking on a couple others. But, I think that Jones is going to be fine at right tackle. You might not get the kind of movement that Stuber always got, but he's a lot more agile than Stuber. And, Hayes had a lot to improve. He really got kind of turnstile a few times, especially by Penn State. But the edge rushers have come down a little bit in the conference. Edge rushes, like last year, the conference was like centers in basketball. Like they just had everybody. And this year the competition is going to be a little bit lighter, so that could go a lot better.
Yeah, I think, and Brian, I mean, again, trying to seize upon what's the next level for this offensive line. I thought Andrew Vistardis far exceeded expectations. I thought his athleticism was underrated. He was more effective as a pulling center than I expected him to be. But there are times at the point of attack where you can really see him get bent back. I don't expect that to be the case with Oluwatimi. He gives you all the athleticism as a puller as well. And then he's a super, super bright guy. And so some of that recognition, some of that adjustment on the fly, and Kay talked a lot about this, that, I'm going to see things, and they're coaching him up on recognition as well, where, hey, he's going to be able to make a lot more things right, even as a new guy. I'm curious your take on, do you think that that's expecting too much when you got a brand new center coming into the fold?
Yes, I do. Especially because, if we're talking about the organization of last year's offensive line, I think it's pretty hard to improve. I mean, their blitz pickups were really good. They made great adjustments on the ground. Like, they were really good at identifying unusual things that the defense was doing and taking advantage of that. And some of that may be that they were really well prepared for Ohio State in particular, because they had to change their defense midseason and they didn't really have a whole lot of complexity. But yeah, I think it's optimistic to think that the guy's going to come in year one at a new team, and no matter how intelligent he is, going to be able to maintain that level. Now, they'll probably be able to make up for it because, Vistardis was not an NFL guy, and Olu probably is. So I think you might get flat performance at the center position, and I think that's going to be great. Like, Vistardis was not an NFL player, but I think I was higher on him than pretty much everybody last year, just in terms of what I've seen horror shows on the offensive line that I've gone over. And there was really very little of that. And whenever that happens, I go back to the center. And that's not just him, of course, but I think that he's an underrated loss for Michigan. And they did really well replacing him, but I don't think an improvement there is likely.
Yeah, it'll be. I definitely, at the point of attack, I am bullish on it. I definitely think they'll improve there. But overall, when it comes to blitz pickup, and maybe it is aspirational to think that your offensive line can make adjustments based on secondary play. But that's what they expect. Cade was very forward in talking about they're trying to make my life easier by having the offensive line sort of carry more of that load, and they think they can with Olu in there. Here's the other thing that I found really interesting, another player, because we're talking about right tackle, for instance. One of the ways in which you can maybe ease some of that pressure is if you get some help from the tight ends. Yeah. That didn't help against Penn State, right? I mean, man, and Eric all talked about it. He said, here's the funny thing. I was playing terrible in that game. He said the touchdown made it. He's like, it's great. I got a touchdown. Everyone's like, wow, you had a great game. He said, I was horrible as a blocker in that game. And he said, as a blocker, I really got to get up to Schooney's level. He said Schoonmaker is a, in the run game, I would say that he is a better blocker than me. And I tried to pick up
what?
I hear you.
I did the grading on these guys. No.
I hear you. Hallelujah, Seth. I had the same reaction. Like, what could he be talking about? And I think he's talking about recognition in the run game. The recognition of who to block. Not necessarily always executing the block, but the recognition of who to block is next level for Schoonmaker. And the Big Ten championship game, the play where JJ's running down the field and he makes the block. That Schoonmaker actually makes that. He actually makes the block that springs that play with great recognition. If you can get more of that consistently from him, and you get more consistency as a blocker from Eric All, that's another level that you can get out of this blocking.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much. It might be a little too much to ask, and because Eric All is the movement tight end, right? So Schoon gets to sit and watch because he's he's not moving. He's the guy on the line of scrimmage, and All is usually coming across. I mean, that's what they love to do, and that's why All graded out so well as a blocker, because they were running a ton of split zone and other things where you use that guy crossing to be your backside blocker, and he would kick out dudes way bigger than him. So, give yourself some credit, man. That was great blocking. But like when you're coming across, it's really hard to identify. You're on one side of the formation and you get to the other side right before the snap, and then you're supposed to identify what's going on. You don't have that moment where you're like literally frozen in place and can look around and see what's coming. And I think that's probably where that's coming from. And I know this has been true for other times. Why am I blanking at his name? The guy who played as a redshirt freshman here, and Brian loved him. And then they switched him to being a movement tight end, and he kind of lost the Massachusetts guy. Why am I blanking on his name?
Ben Mason.
It wasn't Mason, but that's another example. Yeah.
John McCune?
McCune, yeah. McCune was like a fantastic blocker as a redshirt freshman. He was actually like really good at identifying things. And then they used him as that move guy the following year, and it was brand new to him, and he missed a lot of his assignments, I think, because of that effect. Like when you're coming across the formation, it's really hard to pick up on what's over there. The only guy I ever remember being really good at that was Aaron Shea.
Yeah, it was. You always try to pick out where the guys aren't just giving you the stock line, right? You know, when they get specific about, you know, this is a strength, this is what I need to improve on. Eric all said his main problem is he looks back to see if, okay, I made a block, I look back to see if the running back is here, and he said he would lose blocks like that consistently, and so he said he's gonna be he can improve there. He can be better in that. He felt like he was better as a pass pro blocker than Schoonmaker. He felt like Schoonmaker was better as a run blocking tight end, which again, I was like, wow, maybe I just wasn't watching close enough, because I would have given Eric
their jobs were different, but Schoon had to get down and block and keep the linebackers from getting in on those plays, right? Because he's blocking down to the second level, and that's hard. That takes a lot of agility. But he would miss a lot of those. I mean, as soon as like Kobe Dean got out there, and it was like, anybody's gonna lose the team. But he had his way with him in that game. But yeah, he's right about the Iowa game. Schoonmaker had a really great game against Iowa.
So how about this? So guys, last year they were very out front about how they had circled Ohio State. They had Ohio State drills, so on and so forth. And all of them talked about Michigan State this year. They said, we don't have a Michigan State drill yet, but we're going to have one. You can mark my word. We got to beat Michigan State. Like that is as much as we heard them talk about Ohio State last year, I felt like I heard them talk about Michigan State like that this year. And I think while that game is always important, I mean, the magnitude of the game and its importance, like if you don't put Mel Tucker down this year and he goes 3-0 against you, it feels like this could be the start of his D'Antonio era. Maybe it already is. Maybe it's just saying in a sense of denial to say it's not already underway. But what do you think about the magnitude of that game, given his 2-0 start to it, Brian?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a pretty important game.
No, I mean, like, that's not what I mean.
I love that response.
If you don't put them down now, do you think that this catapults them into his D'Antonio era, where D'Antonio, it wasn't just, some success. He was wildly successful against Michigan.
Yeah, I don't, because I don't think Mel Tucker will be around Michigan State like D'Antonio. Like, I think someone will pick him off if he's really that dude.
Now I'm supposed to pay him $10 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, someone in the I mean, like he'll end up at a place in the SEC probably. He's he's from SEC country. He's not like a Midwest lifer like D'Antonio was, and he doesn't have a special burning passion for dunking on the University of Michigan like D'Antonio did. So, I feel like it's likely that if he does have success, he'll move up to a place where he thinks he can win national championships. Now, do I think that's likely this year? No. I mean, they were extremely fortunate last year on that overturned call that we shouldn't get into, lest my two co-hosts' heads explode. And they played way above their heads, and just in terms of like they got extraordinarily lucky with Kenneth Walker, and they were also a team that was about Nebraska's level last year, and they had very different records than Nebraska, because one of those teams was extremely unlucky and one of them was very lucky. So I kind of feel like the only thing that gives me some pause is that Michigan State is not being hesitant about NIL, and I think Michigan needs to get on that. But that's something that will pay off in a couple of years if it does pay off. So I don't think this year that it looks like I'm particularly worried about that game. I mean, they're obviously going to be a solid team, and that's a losable game for Michigan, but I think they should be favored by a touchdown or so.
See, that response though is exact. That's you sort of got to the premise, the meat of the question. We talk about 2020. Oh, that's the COVID year. All right. It's COVID year. Michigan really wasn't prepared. They weren't really in that game. They weren't prepared for it. Last year, fluky. I mean, they took a touchdown off the board, right? That's why they won that game in the grand scheme of things, which I think it happens to be true. But you win a third time, And can we still talk about 20 was a fluke? 21 they got lucky. Can we do that anymore if they lose this year, Seth?
I mean, Michigan State's always done. Michigan State beat us in 1990 as well, and okay, State. But what's a Michigan State drill anyway? I get what Ohio State drill is, right? It's like you play 11 on 9, or you play 9 on 11, then you see what you can do. But what's a Michigan State drill? Like they say something, you have to get offended
I have
by
no
it. Like
idea. I have no idea. I just know. I think it was Eric All who said, "Yeah, we got it. We don't have one yet, but we're going
no,
to."
I get it, and I'm more worried about Mel Tucker being a Duffy Doherty than a Mark D'Antonio. D'Antonio, like he built a program out of things that other schools were not looking at, right? He took guys that Georgia couldn't get into their school and Florida couldn't get into school. He had guys sit around and learn his system for 3 years before he would even let them touch the field. And he just did not lose people, right? No matter like how many crimes you committed, he was going to pick you up from the jail and throw you back right in the field because he could not lose guys. But that was a real program. We joke about it, Michigan fans like, oh no, but like D'Antonio created a program out of a system. Duffy Doherty realized there was an opportunity after the war to go grab talent in ways that Michigan State had not been able to grab talent before, and Michigan wasn't willing to try. And that's kind of what I'm worried is that Michigan's going to try to do things the old-fashioned way, and Michigan State is on the cutting edge of grabbing transfers, the cutting edge of paying players directly to come here, and acting like it's already a free agency system. And I mean, if last year they got lucky, but if they get lucky again, then sometimes your credit pays itself off. And I agree, you kind of have to shut them down a little bit now, because no one can keep on with a narrative of they should have lost a lot.
All right,
more
so real
games.
quick, Ira, steal me a couple minutes. We can't cut the venerable one off. Craig, you have the floor here to end this up.
Well, I just, Seth's points are really good. And the question, it isn't just Michigan State who's in the pay for play game. It's Notre Dame too. And so that's, that's a change in the landscape. And I know that Seth, Sam, it seems to me, now maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me you've been a little depressed about Michigan's recruiting, or at least earlier in the year you were. And I've never seen you depressed about anything. You're always such an upbeat guy, but you were shaking your head saying, man, I don't know how this is going to work out. People are playing by other rules than what Michigan is playing by. I mean, and so how this plays out, I don't know. I don't know what you think right now.
Well, I definitely look. They definitely took a lot of L's in the early going, and I do think that they have an opportunity to make up for some of them here down the stretch. But Brian's point is correct. Look, they are going to be at a deficit when it comes to their willingness to engage in the pay for play thing. So it really raises the pressure to get the guys that you can get who don't. Who don't require the pay for play. So I think they already missed on one, which is Dante Moore. Nick Harbor is another that I don't think it'll take that to get him. And so you got to get that guy. That's a huge guy. They'll still wind up with a good class regardless. Will they be top 5, top 10 consistently? I think that's the potential casualty here. If they don't sort of show that they can consistently mitigate the NIL gap that they are currently at with a lot of their contemporaries. We are done on today's show. We can pick that up. We can pick that up next week with more MGoBlog Roundtable. Always a spirited session. Great to be back with you guys. Much closer to the season. Going to get even more fun. Let's see you next time here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports Ann Arbor.